is a puppet state like Belarus?
We should have sanctioned apartheid South Africa if it meant an increase of inflation in the United States.
Apartheid South Africa and Ukraine have nothing in common.
Please, can you answer the question, please?
No, because you're asking me a hypothetical.
Please. I'm asking. No, my question can explain what my question's rooted in. My question's rooted in.
I will not answer because it's a hypothetical, and I'm not an idealist. Says this person. That's a legit question. Answer it, you pervert. Like, that's a coward's way out. Hello, Titan Uranus. That person's just being a coward. Just answer. Why are people like this such cowards? What do you think? Why do you think that people like this are such cowards? I will have to have the eye on. Whoop! Do you think is President Sunday asleep or awake? Titan, do you know maybe? Titan, do you know if President Sunday is alive? I mean, he's alive, but do you know if President Sunday is like asleep or no? Oh my gosh, I want to go in here.
Right? If Ukraine is a moral struggle, which I've put forward, it is a moral struggle, right? You can disagree with that if you want, but I'm putting forward that it is a moral struggle, right?
Yeah.
I believe that the United States should not use its economic institutions to allow Russia to use America's economic institutions to help fund the war, right? By us unfreezing their money, like, oh, take it all and use that to fund more tanks and more bullets, and please take American dollars, put it into your economy, which will then reverberate into your army, which will then stomp on Ukrainian skulls. Please do it. I don't think most Americans want that because they think that's immoral and they want to support the other person who's defending a young democracy. I believe it's a moral struggle. You disagree with me on that. What I'm asking you is to ask you something which was clearly a moral struggle, which was a struggle against apartheid. Do you think the United States should have sanctioned apartheid South Africa if apartheid South Africa sanctioning them would cause an increase in inflation?
Dylan, it's a retarded question.
Answer the question. Don't dodge it like a bitch. I'm sorry. Stop being a bitch. You gotta answer the question. Come on. This is a simple question. Everybody understands what I'm trying to ask you. Alex.
So, well, how is this a silly question? Like, it's a normal question, of course. Answer it, you coward. Oh my gosh. Answer the question, you coward. True. Unless the hypothetical questions get really silly, but you know. Because hypotheticals can get really silly and detached from the topic. I will. But this hypothetical is pretty directly tied to what's being talked about. It's basically saying, what Bill and Burns is basically saying is, you don't support the US, you don't like the US supporting Ukraine because you're not on the side of Ukraine. But on the topic that you do support, you would want the US to help. Basically, that's what is being said. And he didn't want him to admit that, and he won't because he's a coward.
Do you understand what I'm asking him?
It's a really stupid, loaded question that I can only answer one way.
Wait, 1 second. Let me ask you. Alec.
Like, you're okay with it.
Alec.
Hold on.
Alec, I need to ask you. Would you sanction apartheid South Africa?
Would I sanction it?
Sure.
Yes, would you sanction it? Yes or no?
Cowards. Cowards, I swear.
Chat, what's the right answer?
Wow.
Wow, look at that. Nobody can answer it. It seems like we haven't settled the issue of apartheid 30 years later.
Dylan, we're all against apartheid here. The reason that I think
I would sanction it. Yes.
Okay, look at that. He answered it. Now you answer it.
Listen.
There you go.
Listen, I'm operating on like 50% brain capacity.
What a coward! I
guess
swear.
I want to let non-smoker, like, if you could answer the question and then you can explain why you think that like these two aren't related. I think that's fair, right?
Okay, so I would support sanctioning apartheid South Africa.
What a coward! Isn't the bearded guy like a moderator?
To end apartheid rule and make the country more equitable for blacks, of course, right? And if that increased inflation in the short term,
Oh, that's a red flag for me. That's maybe I'm being sensitive as GW here, but I'm gonna be honest. Using the term blacks is a red flag for me, okay? I don't know. Is it weird that using that term is a little bit of a red flag for me?
term, maybe even into, the midterm, like into like a year or so. Yeah, I think I would have more sympathy for that than I would the Ukraine struggle. So I would have to answer yes. The reason that I'm resisting answering is because they're not comparable examples whatsoever. And this is the issue that I have with you, Dylan, in a broad sense, is that a lot of times when I listen to your content, you reduce everything down to these like totally unrelated examples. And you say, oh, you see, it proves that I'm right about this one conflict. When it's like, that would be like me saying like, okay, well, would you support, supporting Nazi Germany under these conditions? And you'd be like, well, no, I'm against Nazi Germany. I'd be like, gotcha. That's not the own you think it is. It's like, I don't support apartheid. And honestly, look.
Okay, give me an example. Give me a real example in which supporting the Nazi regime would be comparable. You just said some gibberish, to be honest. Like that, you just said some gibberish. I don't know what the word is. I don't know that the word is, but it's no longer the acceptable PC term for sure. I agree, it's a red flag, is what I meant with that. Yeah, it's a red flag for sure. Like, Titan is correct that it's not a slur, but I think it's, I don't know. In my opinion, it sort of signals a certain lack of respect, which I'm not a big fan of, personally.
Do I have some sympathies for the Russian position? Yeah, but I'm not like a major Putin simp either. I feel like there's corruption in Russia. I feel like the war in general is a bad thing. Yeah. I want to see the conflict end as soon as possible. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know, you're kind of picking the most radical examples as comparisons. When
we're in a radical situation.
True.
Yeah, but okay, what I mean is radically different in terms of this one. There isn't apartheid in Ukraine or Russia.
That's all I meant to. Okay, so
radical does not mean radically different.
I don't know what it is with Twitch and conversations on the internet, but hypotheticals or like just comparisons, people don't understand. Just because I'm comparing something doesn't mean I'm necessarily saying these situations are comparable. Let me be clear. Apartheid and what's happening in Ukraine is not the same thing, obviously. Yeah. All I meant to establish is that you would be willing to put the American people through economic woes in order to stand up for something morally internationally. Because that's something I wanted to establish with you. Because if you disagree under any circumstances with like putting American through economic woes because you wanted to make a moral stance, then like we're just never going to agree and there's no reason to even continue the conversation, right?
Fair. Yeah, that's fair. And okay, like the same thing I would say about World War II. Would I support U.S. entry into World War II despite the fact that it had a negative impact at home? Of course, right? But that doesn't mean that I support the intervention in Ukraine. I think the circumstances.
Okay, so that means the real discussion that needs to be had isn't even necessarily about the economics of how this is going to affect the United States. The real discussion that needs to be had is whether the Ukrainian struggle is moral. And we can talk about that if you want.
No, I would say that the real discussion is our support of it moral.
Okay.
Right? Because our support of it is not moral
Is it?
whatsoever.
It's 100% moral. We haven't gone hard enough.
True.
Range ATAX, man.
You want to annihilate huge portions of the population. That's why it's not enough for you.
Is that what I said?
Yeah, you said you wanted to kill all the people in major regions in the east of Ukraine, unless I misunderstood you. Didn't you say you wanted to wipe them off?
What? What are you talking about? What? Have I not been watching Dylan Burns enough? When has Dylan Burns said he wants to kill people of East Ukraine? When? That's not true, right? Do I have to go and check? That's not... I don't believe that. Do I have to fact check it?
Off the face of the earth?
Did you call me retarded earlier, or my question retarded?
Huh?
I'm sorry. Okay. So what I said was I wanted to wipe a country off the face of the earth. A country is a state. That's a nation state, not necessarily a people, right? If I said... Yes.
That sounds like Hitler.
I did want to.
What the fuck? Wait. What did you just said? That sounds like Hitler. Okay. Let me ask you a question. Do you think if I said Rhodesia should be wiped off the face of the earth, would you say, do you want to kill all white people in Rhodesia? No, that's ridiculous.
You want to kill everyone there.
It sounds like. No.
What?
I think I wanted to clarify earlier, and I should have asked this.
Oh my gosh. This is devolved into really a silly conversation. This is not serious anymore. Like, we all know what it means to legally establish a country. We all know what it means to liquidate a country. It happened in history. We all know what is being talked about here. Like, when a country stops being a country, doesn't mean that all of the people in its territory need to die. That's nonsense. Right? I'm not the only person that thinks that it's just a dishonest argument, right? Happening here. This is just...
Earlier, Dylan, what can you just to clarify what exactly you mean by wipe the country off the face of the earth? Because I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of like
what I meant was I do not think the LPR, the DPR, just like Rhodesia, they're nation states that have no right to exist.
Titan, would you like to be wrenched together with Brina? Or do you not like being like a wrench? Like a wrench, Titan? Are the wisest of us here. Hello, Kimbro Slice. Okay, I will. Here you go. Resume. Wait, I have to load the game. Okay. Oh, you do that as well? Okay, let's give you a chance as well, Ron. Okay. So, this is just silly. This is just silly talk that's happening here. So to me, this conversation has already sort of devolved.
Colonial projects propped up by others. Rhodesia was propped up by the South African government, the LPR, the DPR. 90% of their officials have been Russian governments, Russian officials, or they have been FSB agents or Russian citizens. Very few of them have actually been Ukrainians. Igor Girkin, very famously, the defense minister of the DPR, war criminal, by the way. He was an FSB agent. It's been run by FSB agents. It's basically directly run by Moscow because it's an occupational force. It's an extension of the Russian government, as we see coming about through the annexation of these territories.
Just like Belarus is basically a puppet state to Russia, right? That one's also pretty obvious. Pretty easy to see what's happening with Belarus. Even though people do not like it, and the people resistance was just crushed.
Territories. So I don't believe these have a right to exist because they're really just nothing more than an occupational force of what is Ukrainian territory that is being used to brutalize the Ukrainian population and suppress democracy as they replaced all the democratically elected leaders with Russian appointees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that if you need to write an essay to explain what you really meant,
I'm sorry that nuance is difficult for you. It's difficult for most tankies.
Bullshit is difficult for me. It's difficult for regular people too.
What was that?
Bullshit's
difficult for you.
Yeah. Big, long, fucking
I hear
nonsense explanations about why it's okay for you to say you want a country wiped off the face of the earth.
What?
And then you're going to turn around and use all these, reductio ad Hitlerum fucking.
Are you done virtue?
What? This is just nonsense what he's saying. Dylan Burns is explaining why artificial construct was created by Russia. It's controlled by Russia. It's an extension of Russia. Dylan is explaining why it should be basically just incorporated back into Ukraine and stopped being a country of its own. Maybe wipe out of the face of the earth was not the most fortunate wording for it, but that it is what it is. We all understand what Dylan meant. Dylan took time to explain his case, and laughing at someone for being able to explain themselves in more than 3 words is just ridiculous. It is silly. The question of whether or not nation deserves to exist is functional, not irrelevant. I agree with Burns, but I feel like he's being goaded. People are being killed for fuck's sake. The final blue spanner I needed for my infinity cod piece. Fear me, mortals. We all know what Dylan meant here. And by the way, I agree with his position. Okay? War isn't bad because it hurts nations. War is bad because it hurts people. And I respect that Dylan framed this argument in that way. Made perfect sense to me, yeah. I don't think this is going to be a surprise that I'm 100% on Dylan's side on this argument. It's not even close. This person's being ridiculous.
Signaling about how I'm a genocidal maniac and we can move on.
No, I'm not quite done. In fact, I'll go on. You're full of shit and you're only over there to promote your fucking channel.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Couldn't win the debate earlier. Bringing it back up because you can't deal with the fact that I used nice words towards the occupation. I was mean. I was mean towards the Russian occupiers. Oh, my God. I can't believe it.
You fucking... writhe like the fucking disgusting demon you are.
The demon? My God.
Yeah. You're a fucking creature, bro.
A creature? What, are you dehumanizing?
Is this for real? Is this for real? I don't disagree with what he said. I think he should have said, and I think people need to say more often, that a person argument is wrong. Yeah. Is this for real? Why are all tankies such jokes?
Me because I'm gay? Wow, that is disgusting. How dare you be homophobic towards me because I'm gay? Calling me a creature. Dehumanization is evil. Why, you Nazi scum, you fascist, why do you love Hitler? We can do this all day where we can just... You called me a creature. Why are you dehumanizing me? Why would you do that? You know Hitler dehumanized people? You see how we devolve this conversation into nothing? We can devolve this conversation to be...
True. It is devolving into nothing. I'm so happy that Dylan Burns is just recognizing it for what it is. Why are Marxist-Leninists just such jokes?
Be absolutely worthless if we want to. Let's be... let's start a new page and let's be a little bit more good faith. Okay? Maybe slightly? Okay. Fantastic.
So what other atrocities do you want to compare this to corner me into agreeing with you? While we're on,
I'm not cornering you.
Great start on the good faith.
I'm not cornering you into. I'm not trying to corner you. I'm trying to see if you're consistent. And I'm trying to see, really, the South Africa question was to ask if you would be willing, because I wanted to know if you're just a hardcore American nationalist and you're like, fuck the rest of the world, I'm American, right?
I'm anti-intervention in general. I grew up in the Iraq War generation, the Afghanistan War generation. I watched, lots of people who grew up in my town go off to that war, many of whom died. And many of the people, the Americans who went over to the...
This person should just stop talking about politics, in my opinion. Doesn't know what he's talking about. Also notice that he did not exactly deny being a nationalist. I'm just gonna say that, which is pretty, for a tankie to be a nationalist, that's a pretty interesting mix to me. Incredible. A tankie that's a nationalist because he has not exactly denied being one. He just said that he's anti intervention. I know how holding people to the point is cornering them. Yeah, so good faith.
Middle East committed fucking war crimes. And now we're sitting here saying no, guys, we just have to support Ukraine because actually, the other side's really bad and they're uniquely evil and we got to be the world's police force. And it's the same arguments that the Bush administration...
Oh, yeah. Because when a country asks for help and you give that country help, then it's quote unquote being the police force. Okay. I don't think it's MLs. I think it's internet poisoning. MLs, in my experience, are really serious about theory and read a lot, but they apply that with praxis very carefully. I believe I'm a bit skeptical around because, at least from my real life ML experience, I believe those two cross paths again in a later debate panel along with Yankee Donkey. He's running into a wall again. Why are you tricking me into doing this? What dollar store Kratos down there is doing is literally the same thing that Destiny or Vosh do when they get put in a corner. I'm not so sure actually if he does the same thing that Vosh does. You'd have to give me an example of Vosh doing something comparable to what's happening here.
Used about Iraq.
It's literally not the same arguments.
It's exactly the same.
Okay, so what weapons of mass destruction? Actually, the Russian government made the weapons of mass destruction argument about Ukraine. They said that that Ukraine had bioweapons that targets Russian DNA. I mean,
I'm talking about the moral framing of these.
So yes,
things.
taking out all of the lies of the Bush administration is kind of for example, you were killing me for the comparison earlier, right? This is not a comparison that I would be happy for because I don't think it's comparable.
Okay, it's not. Listen, that's fair. Okay, they're not exactly the same, so I won't play that card. But the point I'm trying to make broadly is that I'm against interventionism in a general sense. Now, are there extreme examples where it's okay, it makes sense to sanction that country? Yeah, I mean, I'm for that, right? That makes sense. It's reasonable. It's very different than what we're doing in Ukraine, and the situation in Ukraine, in my view, is not one that's going to be helped by us sanctioning Russia and then sending billions of fucking, I actually have no issue even with sending aid in terms of medical aid and all that stuff to the people of Ukraine. I really have no problem with that. But what I have an issue with is billions of dollars being given, to...
You're just against helping them win. You're okay, send them aid as they get killed, medical aid, but helping a country win, no, that's too far for you because you're pro-Russia. Thank you.
Weapons contractors to make all of these fucking guns and tanks and missiles and bombs and send those over to you to just kill Russians, and that's somehow good. I don't really, the calculus doesn't add up.
Okay, well, I feel like there was a lot of when you boil it down to we gave money to company to kill Russians. I feel like that leaves out a lot of context, right? Yes, but I could also say that we gave money to companies to kill Germans, and then we're at the same position because we didn't include.
Now you're doing it again.
No,
bro.
I'm not doing it because what you did,
example. Now you're doing it to me.
I'm telling you that that's reductionist to boil
True.
it down to those core elements, because you
Exactly.
can do that with any war. You can do that with any war. You can do that with any war.
True.
Okay, then I could just say,
Why wouldn't you do it with any war? This is just ridiculous. I think I remember like one debate when Vosh acted this way when he got backed into corner destiny. He did it all the time though. Can you give me an example? I need to. Maybe we will look at it later.
about a different war. I can say it about a different war. If you want me to do it about a different war, I could say that oh my gosh, these international socialists, they gave money to like some African rebels to kill white people. Like, that's terrible. And what I'm talking about is Rhodesia. That would be a terrible, because I've reduced it and I removed some key elements that would change how people perceive the situation.
Ridiculous.
Because those key elements are important. For example, when you talk about giving money to military companies, I believe profiting off of death with like selling of weapons and weapons of war, I think that's inherently immoral, and I think as human beings that's something we need to overcome. We need to find a way to do that, whether that's with the nationalization of weapons manufacturers, something else, I don't know. I don't have the solution to that. But that's nothing new. That has been an element of warfare since the beginning of warfare, as ever since people figured out how to sharpen a rock, people have been selling sharpened rocks. That was true in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, every war that's ever happened. And so that element is nothing special. And so when you analyze that from a moral stance, I just don't understand. That just feels like how does that affect this war in difference to say all the wars that were moral, which you admit there were some, like which people also made money off of.
Not since World War II, in my view.
So would you
And
say,
actually, World War II is an incredibly hypocritical argument for Americans to make, because we didn't even get involved in the war until we were attacked. We didn't give a fuck. In fact,
we did get involved.
Many American
did get involved. We sent aid to the Soviet Union. We sent it to the UK. We sanctioned Japan. We got involved.
American companies supported Nazi Germany and Hitler too.
Okay,
I have to jump in here.
Wait, but an American company and the American government are two separate entities. There are American companies that are still operating within Russia.
Right, but what I'm trying to get across to you is that the idea that America's involvement in the war is purely this moral thing to stop Nazism, when there are American companies not being prevented from doing so, by the way, from the American government, funding Hitler's rise.
Like, I'm actually really wondering if talking to people like this is not a waste of time for Dylan. Like, I don't know. What do you think? Is it a waste of time for Dylan to speak to people like this or no? I mean, it's not even a debate thing, it's a machismo thing. And really shitty men or insecure men feel like their status is being threatened. They puff up their chest and shout. Right. That's fair. That's fair, I guess.
To power, funding the Nazi party, right? Doing business in Nazi Germany. Okay, we do nothing to stop that, or at least not enough. And yeah, we did send aid to England and France and the Soviet Union. You're correct in that, but we didn't get involved in the war until we were attacked. So this idea that we're the moral
let me ask you a question. You would say sending aid is getting involved. We didn't join the war until like if you were fist fighting someone else and I gave you a knife, I got involved, right?
True.
Like, but because people downplay American involvement up to that point, we were an ally in anything but name up to that point, and people forget that the reason the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor wasn't because we were just sitting there and they killed us. They attacked us because we just loved freedom too much, like many people like to pretend. They attacked us because we were sanctioning them, because we were like, hey, yo, you're going a little crazy time. You're kind of Fortnite dancing over all of Asia right now. You need to stop that.
It actually was my understanding up to this point that we didn't get involved until they bombed Japan. Are you saying that's incorrect, Dylan?
That is incorrect. That is incorrect for one important reason, right? Why did... Okay, let's answer this one important question. I have a really important question. Why did Japan attack the US? Do you know? Why? Why do you think Japan attacked the US? The answer is because Japan was choking because of the sanctions that the US brought upon Japan. And that is getting involved. So in that sense, Dylan is absolutely correct. You know? Do you know what I mean? Japan was being sanctioned 100%. And it attacked the US in order to counter those sanctions.
That is incorrect, yes.
Okay.
Is correct. Dylan's just coming up with some weird.
Wait, okay. So do you think we're involved in the war in Ukraine? Do you think we're involved in the war in Ukraine?
Okay, I would say that our level of involvement in Ukraine is not at all the same as our level of involvement in World War II.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that are we involved?
No, I wouldn't say we're involved. We're not
Oh.
directly involved. We don't have troops over there.
Well, okay. Well, then we don't. What
Or at
are we
least
talking about? Well, okay, you're saying directly involved. I'm asking if we're involved. Okay, I'm not asking. We have. I'm just asking for the word involved. Right? We're involved. Right? Come on, we're sending. We're part of the reason why they're winning.
This is so dishonest. This is so cowardly. This is so pathetic. He was crying about the US being involved all this time, and now he's saying the US is not involved. Because that would mean that the US was involved during World War II. This is so pathetic. What's going on here? Responding to Japanese occupation of key airfields in Indochina, July 24, following the agreement between Japan and Vichy France, the US froze Japanese assets on July 26, 1941. Exactly, right? So it got involved. And this person could not even say that the US is involved right now, because that would mean that the US was involved then. Like, this is so pathetic.
Yeah, I get what you're trying to do. It's another fucking,
This isn't. I'm not doing anything. This is. I'm just asking you to acknowledge that we're involved in Ukraine.
So pathetic.
America is involved in Ukraine in terms of providing aid to the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same way. That's the same way we were involved in World War II up until we were bombed.
True.
Okay. See, what I'm trying to get across is an argument regarding America's involvement with World War II, because you keep bringing it up as this example of like, oh, well, there was this genocide and Nazis, and I'm trying to,
I never said
maybe it's
that.
wrong.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have. Okay, whatever. I'm strawmanning you.
Whatever.
Fine. I'll just call it strawman then. But what I'm trying to get across to you is this idea that America's involvement in Nazi Germany is not, World War II and, declaring war on Nazi Germany is not this like great good effort to save Europe, save the Jews, save the Roma people, save homosexuals, save disabled people, save the world, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And it came down to us being attacked. That's really what it was all about. And, yes, we want it to come in a sense to aid our allies, and so that's why we were funding, sending weapons and aid and stuff over to England and France and the Soviet Union.
So pathetic.
But I don't think that I always buy this line of reasoning that like America jumped in and saved the day when it was like the Soviet Union that toppled Nazi Germany. We mostly did a bulk of our fighting in the Pacific. And
Okay. It was the Soviet Union that... No. This is just sad. Oh no. Like, the USSR would not have done it without support. Let's just be honest about that. Okay?
we didn't get involved until, well, we did our part in liberating France, but a bulk of our fighting took place in the Pacific, and it was clearly in retaliation for being attacked by the Japanese. So I'm not buying this whole America always does the right thing at the end of the day. Ultimately, I think it was for the greater good that we got involved. But I don't think that that's the same situation in Ukraine whatsoever.
I would say when it comes to World War II and our involvement, I think like all wars, there's a multitude of factors as we get involved in wars. I think we have a tendency to try to like find simple answers to complicated questions, because it makes like a good like sound bite, or like it makes a good like it's easy to explain to people, and it's because it's easy if you're a person.
USSR toppled Nazi Germany on its own without any help. Okay, sure.
You're just told this is the reason why, nothing else, and it's easy for you to have that, and then you got the answer. I think we got involved for World War II for a ton of reasons. I think a lot of them were economic. I think a lot of them were geostrategic and military, and I think some of them were in fact moral. I think it would have been a lot more difficult to rationalize the amount of support we were giving to allied nations up until we joined the war to the American public, considering that we were in the throes of a fucking depression, if it wasn't for the fact that the Germans were fighting a war of aggression against Poland, a war of aggression against France, who was our ally during the First World War, and Americans hold sympathy towards the French due to their support during the American Revolution, and us fighting hand in hand with them, with the devil dogs and everyone else during the First World War. And I think that's the same reason that Americans feel very sympathetic.
That is sad that France and England did not feel the same camaraderie with Poland during World War II. Because Poland was basically just sold out after World War II to become a USSR puppet state.
Sympathetic towards the Ukrainians is not because I as an American really want to make sure that that we have another NATO expanded state, and you ask an American, that's not what they're going to tell you. They're going to be like, the fucking Russians are killing everybody, it's fucking disgusting, and that's why I think we should support Ukraine. That's what the average American's going to tell you. And I think that also gives the American government more wiggle room and allows them to be able to send the aid that they are, is because it's popular, because it's also moral to give the person getting invaded by another force who wants to take their territory and occupy them. It's moral to give the person defending themselves a gun. It's moral to give them the means to defend themselves, especially if they're liberating territory and uncovering mass graves left and right left by the occupier, which barely considers them human.
So what now?
Right. Yeah. Look, I think what it comes down to, and maybe you disagree with me, is this idea that ultimately this doesn't feel like a war that America is supporting for the greater good or morals.
It doesn't matter.
America is supporting this.
I don't care about the reasons why the U.S. is supporting the war. The fact is that the only thing that matters is that the U.S. is supporting the war. I don't care about the reasons. I care about the results. I don't know about anyone else here. I think we all agree that not one of us cares about the reasons. We all here care about the results, right? And I'm really hoping that Dylan will just say here that nobody cares why the US is doing this. All we care is the result, right? That's my opinion. Who cares?
This war, because we need to maintain, a sense of legitimacy in the world, right? Where we've drawn clear boundaries with Russia. You can't do X, you can't do Y, you can't do Z. And we've done the same with China. And as they continue to, one of the reasons, if we're talking objectively, that this war is such an historic event is because Russia legit just said, go fuck yourself, I'm not going to listen, and just sent troops in. And that, to me, is super significant because this is the first real breakdown of U.S. hegemony since the end of the Cold War. And I think, in some sense, that actually serves a greater good. I think that our maintenance of...
What? I'm sorry. Russia invading Ukraine and mass murdering people serves a greater good. This person, 2022. Ridiculous. Like, it's easy. It's always easy for tankies that usually live in the US in the safety of their nice warm home to say that invading and killing people in smaller countries is just for the greater good, because his neck is never going to be on the line. He's never going to be in danger so he can just comment from the safety of his house about how Ukraine being basically, I don't know, sacrificed is for the greater good. So pathetic and spineless. This is my opinion as a person who's like from here. Yeah, exactly. This is just ridiculous what this person is saying. This person is not left-leaning. This is not what socialism or communism is about.
Empire, this ultra bloated, ultra expensive thing that really doesn't benefit the American people other than giving cheaper consumer goods. It by and large, it's this disgusting, really like kind of evil thing that should be torn apart. And I would prefer it torn apart non-violently. So in conflicts like this, where Russia is basically just looking at boundaries we've drawn, ignoring them, I think it actually, in my view, it'd be beneficial for America in the long run to just not fund the conflict at all, send aid where it's necessary.
Yeah, it would be just beneficial to the US to just let Ukraine be demolished and incorporated into Russia. You know what? Then maybe Russia could get Lithuania and Poland. That would be also probably beneficial for NATO and the US. Why not? Russia should just get Lithuania, Poland, and, incorporate those countries as well. Why not? It would be beneficial for the US to break up that monopoly, Yeah, for sure. Of course. Just send some first aid kits when it's necessary. That'll do it. For
basically
sure.
Back off. And I feel any other, copium of like, oh, well, it's for the greater good, defending democracy and all this stuff.
Wait, you're gonna say copium about the greater good when you just spewed some bullshit about greater good, about abandoning Ukraine being for the greater good? And you're gonna talk about the copium of the greater good?
It's kind of like, as I said,
I feel sorry for Dylan. Like, Dylan must be so exhausted with this conversation. Like, Dylan must be trying so hard not to, Dylan must be trying so hard not to just call him an idiot at this point. You can see it on his face. You can see that Dylan is a little bit struggling a little bit not to call this person an idiot, right?
just cope. We're going to be sending all these weapons over there. We're going to station troops. We're going to, do this kind of show of force stuff.
Don't get me too hard.
This is a losing effort,
Cope.
in my opinion. It's a losing effort.
So first, on the moral side, like for World War II, I think people like easy answers to complicated questions. And I think, sirens, because people like easy answers to complicated questions, it's very easy to say America's doing this 100% because they just want to fuck over Russia and they just want to destroy this.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. Just let them have Ukraine and then Poland and Lithuania while you're at it. It's for the greater good. Otherwise, you're coping.
This birth of the multipolar world order. But if you ask the average American, that's not what they're going to tell you. That's not what they care about. And it is the American public support for the war during these economic hard times after COVID and with the inflation issues and everything else we're doing that allows the American government to basically have carte blanche to give Ukraine everything it needs to win. It is that the American people which have made the moral calculation that this is a struggle they want to support.
Good.
Right? And so I do think that we're kind of simplifying that a little bit. And if this, as you are saying,
That's an
is
understatement.
the birth of the multipolar world order because Russia said fuck you, I have to say this is the worst possible advertisement anyone could have possibly put together for the multipolar world order, as mass graves are uncovered en masse, women are raped, civilians bombed, hospital bombed by a nation just flagrantly trying to annex large swaths of territory. I would say it's fucked. And honestly, it makes the unipolar world order
like defending that. Actually, interestingly enough, Lenitas Dylan is making your point right here and now. Like defending Russia in this is such a very interesting look. Very interesting to be defending Russia in this. And they saying that this is for the greater good.
Honestly look better by saying that this is an advertisement of the multipolar world order, which isn't even something that I'm not hyped about unipolar world order. I want a different system built.
It's one or the other.
I don't think it necessarily has to be one or the other. Or if the poles need to be placed in different places, I don't think they should be placed in Russia and China. I think they should be placed in international institutions.
Well, we will be one of those poles just based on the size of our economy and our military and our influence in the world.
And I'll also say Russia kind of sucks, and I don't mean that as like the Russian people suck or like the spirit of the Russian people. Russian people are perfectly fine. I know a lot of Russian people. Some of my best friends are Russian, but I would say that. Actually, that's not true. None of my best friends are Russian. But
I have Russian friends. I can't be anti-Russian.
I can't be Russophobic.
Yeah, you're sounding like that whole like the racist guy who's like, oh, but I have black friends. Like
that was the joke.
I
yes.
know that you're not trying to. I get where you're trying to, but like maybe rephrase that.
That was the joke. That I wanted to sound like that. But
I don't know. My chat wasn't happy about it.
I know. But this is the worst advertisement we could possibly have for a multipolar world order. If the birth of it is literally just the ripping of a nation's sovereignty away and the smashing about.
You know what? Even if Dylan was seriously saying I can be Russophobic, I have Russian friends, it would still sound better. Even if he was 100% serious, like it would still sound better than this guy saying that abandoning Ukraine is just for the better good. Like, okay, ridiculous.
For democracy, as all these war crimes are committed flagrantly.
Is this guy really going to say, oh, that's a bad look, Dylan? After all that he has said in this conversation?
By a nation state which has no respect to what the local indigenous population of Ukraine wants. Whether it was what they did to the Tartars for the last 8 years or what they're doing in Crimea now.
The Tatars?
The boundaries
the last 8 years? Oh, Dylan, oh, you sweet summer child. The history of mistreating the Tatars is much longer than just 8 years. Oh, you sweet summer child. Like it's poor, boring people and the food has worse standards or tastes worse. Yeah.
This was the boundaries the Ukrainian people drew after the collapse of the Soviet Union when every single oblast in Ukraine voted to be independent, including Crimea, all of the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, Kherson. That was the boundaries.
Zaporozhye is like the historical home of the Cossacks. Like, of course, claiming Zaporozhye to be Russian is one of the most ridiculous things ever. Zaporozhye, of all places in the world. Like, makes me want to laugh. Haha.
Ukrainian people drew. We didn't draw the boundaries. The Ukrainians drew the boundaries.
True.
The Russians are now trampling upon the boundaries the Russians agreed to, by the way. So
are you aware that in 91, the Ukrainians voted for sovereignty, but also to remain part of the Soviet Union, or whatever the Soviet Union would become?
Okay.
71%.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm suggesting to you is that the people in eastern Ukraine, the circumstances in the early 90s versus now are very different. And obviously, that whole conflict arose in 2014 with Maidan. So I think that their feelings on that probably aren't exactly the same as they would have been in the early 90s when the original borders were determined.
Yeah, I think they're more aggressively anti-Russian now.
True.
Yeah. You think the people in eastern Ukraine
Yes,
are more
absolutely. Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I think from the conversations that I've had, now of course I'm me and you're not going to take my word out for it, but most people seem to feel either backstabbed in some capacity because there's two groups. There's Eastern European, most Eastern Ukrainians I've talked to always were not supportive of like any annexation. They might have had friendly feelings towards Russia, but they never wanted to be annexed necessarily. There's not really any polling to indicate that Eastern Ukrainians wanted to necessarily be annexed by Russia in the recent history.
Right.
But they had friendly feelings towards them. Many of those people seem to somewhat feel backstabbed because they kind of bought into this idea of like the brotherly nation state, the idea that Russia is the brotherly nation. They both like come from the same Slavic history, and that we look out for the best interests of each other.
Which, interestingly enough, now that Poland and Ukraine is now that Poland and Ukraine are closer than ever, Poland and Ukraine are now the sisterly nations. Okay. Like the super close sisterly nations. We can call upon our joint history of being the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. You know, this is the result of this conflict.
Other, and now they come to their home, which is smashed to smithereens by Russian bombs, torn apart by Russian artillery, and their family members killed by Russian bombardment. And so they see that it was the Russians who initiated this invasion and did this to them, and they feel betrayed. When I was in eastern Ukraine, everybody that I met fighting against the Russian army spoke Russian.
Yeah.
Every single one. I couldn't hear them speaking Ukrainian. And hearing so much dialogue before coming to this country about, the Russian-speaking populations, these people speak Russian, they want to be part of Russia. And then I meet the Russian speakers, and they're the ones firing at the Russians, shooting at the Russians.
Yeah, of course. I think only people in the US would believe such a thing. But anyone living in here would understand.
Just because, somebody speaks Russian, or might have some Russian family members, or might have family members.
Anyone living in here would understand that people in Ukraine, a lot of people in Ukraine just speak Russian. Of course, yeah. And it means nothing.
Even within Russia, doesn't necessarily mean they want to be annexed by a neighboring nation.
Right.
I think there's a lot of people in Mexico who speak English probably in the border regions because they're American immigrants over there, or there are a lot of people in Texas who speak Spanish. That doesn't mean that they want to be annexed by Mexico to bring back the historical borders of the Mexican whatever the fuck. So I think that they don't want to be annexed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What
That's
about
why
the
that's why they did a sham referendum, because they couldn't have a real referendum, because if they had a real one.
True.
Listen, I'm no Elon guy. I think Elon's, very like dishonest and full of shit and all that stuff promotion. But what are your
But
thoughts on that proposal that if there were like a UN supervised referendum in at least
That specific part, I mean, obviously it would depend on the specifics of the referendum, but I'm not inherently against that. The rest of it I thought was shit, but that's like the one part I think is somewhat salvageable, even though it'll never happen.
Yeah, so look, I really hate when arguments get to this thing of like, well, I don't believe it was real. No, I do. It was like, what do I know? I think the referendum is significant, right? It's not something you can just ignore.
yes, you can. Because I know history. I know in particular the history of this region, Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, etc. And I know that historically this type of referendums were a scam, okay? So I understand how those referendums work. So yeah, you can absolutely disregard them. Of course. Of course you can. Yeah. Ridiculous.
ignore. But
don't
okay,
know
like
anything.
I think it's actually reasonable to say if there's a UN supervised referendum and then the people in those regions vote to be part of Russia, I think that we should probably be doing everything in our power if we really agree to a peaceful resolution here to like try to figure out how to make that happen. Obviously, like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that if there was I think that would be the best outcome. I don't think anybody is going to be pushing towards that outcome. I don't think the Russians want that outcome. I don't think the Ukrainians want that outcome. I don't think the Americans want that outcome. So I just don't think that's going to happen. It'd be cool. Sadly, I don't think that's in the cards. Speaking on this referendum in particular, nobody who is displaced from the territory, which is like a decent part of the population. We're talking like 50-60% of the population is displaced. None of them got to vote on it. So a bunch of people didn't get to vote.
People
whether
never
their
get to
house
vote.
was annexed by the Russian Empire. Then there's also the fact that if you're in Ukraine...
Wait. I have to... What was annexed by the Russian Empire? Well, let me...
So I just don't think that's going to happen. It'd be cool. Sadly, I don't think that's in the cards. Speaking on this referendum in particular, nobody who is displaced from the territory, which is like a decent part of the population. We're talking like 50-60% of the population is displaced. None of them got to vote on it. So a bunch of people didn't get to vote whether their house was annexed by the Russian Empire. Then there's also the fact that if you're in...
Interesting. Their house, okay. I thought Dylan would make a more historical argument, but there is a lot more.
Ukrainian-controlled territory in Donetsk or Kherson or in a lot of these areas, you don't get to vote either on whether your house just got annexed. Well, that's pretty fucked too. That doesn't really make much sense. Then there's the fact that the Russian government admitted after the vote that they didn't even know what borders they were going to draw for the region. So that means people voted on the borders of their community they didn't even know what the borders were going to be. How can you have a vote on independence if you don't even have any idea what the borders are going to be because you're constantly that doesn't make fucking sense. And it was also done in reaction to the Russians getting crushed in Kharkiv because the defensive line was so thin and they got pushed across the Oskil River. So they did it in a move of desperation, and that was shown because they canceled a referendum in Kherson a month before due to safety concerns because of the Kherson counteroffensive. And on top of everything else, there's like a lot of footage of like a lot of ballot stuffing that has been circulated online. I do just want to be clear, like the Russians have a trend of doing this type of thing in Ukraine. I don't think the Russians care about democracy.
Not just in Ukraine.
Word when we're talking about the government.
Not just in Ukraine, okay? Not.
I look, again, you're over there. I'll take your word that you've spoken to people. I don't have any evidence to counter that you've spoken to people. I wasn't present at the referendum, so I can't say that they weren't true. So, I might just have to, hey, like, I guess find sources on that. Otherwise, it's not worth even going down that road with you. But I guess my argument to that, I could just leave it as it's worth getting an accurate measure because I don't think that it's at all like this, like absolute resistance to being annexed by Russia either. I think it's probably, I wouldn't even know the percentages, but I would imagine there's a significant number of people who would like to be part of Russia and want to move away from Ukraine. They view it as some corrupt government since 2014, and they feel like they're in hostile hands. And, look, maybe there's a percentage of people over there who just want to be independent in general.
I would say there's probably similar support for Calexit.
Okay. Well, look, I'll take your word for it. But moving on from that, I'm willing to go as long as you want, but we do risk going in circles here.
Yeah.
I just think that, again, you were saying before about this is a terrible advertisement for the multi-polar world order. There's two responses I have to that. One, this is kind of a bad, in my opinion, advertisement for the unipolar world order because it feels like something that's inevitably, objectively kind of falling apart. And we're basically just pouring money into it and proliferating death, war, and destruction for the sake of maintaining something that probably isn't good for us, the regular American people, or the people of the world. And then two, I would ask you, what about all of the... and you said before, I have to give you credit. You said before that you don't support the unipolar world order. Well, I do kind of want to mention all of the, and there are many, many war crimes carried out in the name of maintaining that unipolar world order. I mean, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan. Just look at all the massacres in Iraq under American occupation.
Iraq, then therefore Ukraine should not be supported, huh? Iraq, and therefore Ukraine should not be. It should just be abandoned to rot. Great argument. Iraq, and therefore unipolar power structure, and therefore Ukraine should just be left to rot.
Garib, you can go on and on and on. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people died really for no fucking reason. I don't know. I would say that there's
the thing is,
all right, yeah, no, just fucking go ahead.
Okay. So I would say that the first thing.
Wait a minute. So just another thing, because I wasn't done. So I just want to mention to you that there are a number of indictments that you could make against the unipolar world order that are just as significant, and for you to ignore that is fucking disgusting.
Disgusting. Oh, scumfuck. I got it. Ooh. Okay.
Why that?
I would say that the first thing is, I mean, we didn't proliferate the violence. It was the Russians that they invaded. You can't condemn a state for somebody helping a state defend itself or a state defending itself against an invasion. I wouldn't look at the Chinese if they supported the Vietnamese during our invasion of Vietnam and say, wow, look at you helping these helpless people with AK-47s fighting in the jungle against the most powerful military on the planet. There's no chance in hell any of these people are going to win. You're honestly guilty for supporting the Vietnamese against the United States. Of course, that'd be ridiculous. The main culprit would be the Americans taking over from the French colonial occupation.
True,
that
exactly.
would be the main culprits in Vietnam.
Very nice.
It wouldn't be the Chinese.
Very good that you're giving the Vietnam example, because that's a great
Until,
example.
of course, they invaded.
It's a great example, and it's not World War II as well. So he cannot even complain about this really good example. You should give that example more, because it's actually an example that is really tough for him to retort, right? I wonder what's his retort to the Vietnam example.
After, or the Russians for supporting the Viet Cong as well. The Soviet Union, but then of course includes modern day Russia. So I would say first off, so I think that they're the main one, proliferating violence because they're the one who invaded. As for the unipolar world order, if somebody was to make the case for the multipolar world order with Russia and China as the other poles, for me, I would be like, okay, what's the case you're making to how it's better than the unipolar world order, or how it's better than the system we have currently?
True.
And the first ringing shot of it is Russia invading and murdering and raping and filling up mass graves. It's not the best advertisement. It isn't. And I agree with you. America's done a lot of evil things. I've already agreed to this. And so I brought them up. So you can't say it's disgusting that I didn't highlight them. I specifically went out of my way to highlight Western Sahara. When's the last time you heard somebody on Twitch mention Western Sahara, for fuck's sake, and the UN referendum there, right? Nobody has mentioned that since the 90s. We even sold them out for the Israelis. So yeah, I can both say that the unipolar world order has problems, but a multipolar world order with Russia as one of these mighty poles doesn't seem to be a good option for the people around Russia.
True.
The Latvians, the Lithuanians, the Estonians, and the Poles who are all saying this is fucking terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
Even the Belarusians who are.
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, it is terrifying. The Pole here has spoken. Right? Gosh darn. Gigglers.
Supposed to be in the Russian sphere of influence don't seem to be very happy with this invasion, as they're engaging in acts of sabotage, and Lukashenko can't convince his population to invade the country, as they were almost openly revolting against him 2 years ago due to his sham election.
Also, not almost openly. 100% openly. It wasn't almost openly. It was 1000% openly. Okay? Hard to believe this. It's already been 2 years since then.
So all I'm saying is like, this is a bad advertisement from the multipolar world order.
Yep.
Yeah. So a couple things on that. First of all, I would argue that the idea that I'm suggesting there should be a world governed by Russia and China is not really what I'm trying to say. What I'm suggesting is a better world system, in my view, would be one where there's a better or a more equitable balance of power between the major countries in the world in terms of economic size and military size. Really, I think every country that is has nuclear capabilities should have more or less like an equitable say in many of these conflicts. Because
what about Israel?
Yeah, I think. Listen, I'm not a fan of Israel at all. But I would say that if Israel is a nuclear power, they're a major military force. Now, a lot of that is because of direct U.S. support. And if you want to get into my views on Israel, that's a whole different other thing. But as the world stands right now, objectively, we look at it like, yeah, there are these, I don't know, 8 to 12 or so countries that have these major, economic implications for the rest of the world. If anything happens there, it affects the rest of us. And these, huge, in many ways, bloated military industrial complexes, many of which include nuclear weapons. And any event, that occurs with one of these countries, it's not a positive or it's not a good thing if America is the arbiter of justice and comes swooping in to try to sort shit out. Because in every single example where we've attempted to do that, it's created more disruption and problems. Vietnam you mentioned before, but Korea is another great example. I mean, we fucking totally ruined that peninsula. We killed, upwards of millions of people. And for what? For this divided country now, where half of it is, starving and the other half of it is, booming in terms of its economics, but there's this mass underclass of very poor people. And, it just all like, I think,
guess,
generally speaking, what I'm just
I guess it would have been better if the whole of Korea was starving. Yeah, it would have been better if all of Korea was starving. Is your argument? What are you trying to say here? What is the argument that you're trying to make? Like, yeah, I have to wonder. Right?
Trying to get across is that maintaining empire,
What are you trying to...
in some sense, it kind of was logical during the Cold War because it's this vying for power between these two major countries. I'm not saying it was right. It at least made sense. Now it doesn't really make sense. What we're trying to do is sort of contain Russia and China and all these, well, really Russia and China, from gaining any sort of spheres of influence out of these tight little regions. And I think, honestly, Dylan, at the end of the day, it's a losing battle.
Can I ask you a question? You say you keep saying like the unipolar world is showing its cracks, and obviously America is not the 90s anymore. But if anything, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has made me a lot less confident in Russia's abilities as a world power, and a lot more confident in NATO's strength, considering that NATO has basically been guideless. I would say sailless, directionless. I think is the word, directionless for the last ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Like, what's its purpose past the collapse of the Soviet Union, since it was a mutual defense pact to protect from the Soviet Union. And then the Russians invaded Ukraine and gave NATO purpose again, when many people were questioning whether it even needed to exist, and then added 2 more NATO states, Sweden and Finland. And if Ukraine wins, there's a decent chance it'll be added as a NATO state. So personally, I would say this hasn't made me like, the cracks in the unipolar world order, America and NATO look so weak. If anything, I mean, Russia probably is coming out of this looking 10 times weaker. And I think it's making a lot of authoritarian leaders around the globe kind of question exactly how much this unipolar world order has fallen. And a lot of people are questioning whether or not they can go through with similar actions in their part of the world. I also think that this should be part and parcel with America decreasing support to outright eliminating support for Saudi Arabia.
That is true that Russia is looking very weak. Russia is looking more or less as the way that it looked before World War I, when it lost a war against Japan. Everyone was afraid of Russia as an empire, and then it lost against Japan, and everybody saw how weak it was, and we are seeing the repeat of that right now with Ukraine. Basically.
For limiting support for Azerbaijan, we need to have a long and hard discussion about Erdogan's government. Like, I feel like I gotta like make this disclaimer at the end of each sentence because, you know, America do bad. But yeah, like I don't see the collapse when it comes to this invasion. Because the Russians, I mean, their army kind of fucking sucks. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't you think there's a difference between the amount of in terms of the full power of the Russian military, especially after they implement mobilization, versus what they've done earlier?
Shoigu says that already 200,000 conscripts have already been deployed into Ukraine, and they're still retreating. They've more than doubled the amount of troops they have in Ukraine, and they're still retreating.
True. This is cope.
Gotcha.
What's going on?
Hey man, I'm not fucking General Patton over here. What I'm saying is that, you know,
what is happening is cope. Shakespeare, come on. What we're witnessing is cope. This person mentioned cope before. This is cope. Saying, oh, just wait for Russia to show us
it stands to reason to some extent
power.
That the Russian military, which is just by man much larger, and you would imagine in some sense, you know, better equipped. You know, maybe that's not the case now.
Better equipped. Cope. Russian army is better equipped. Such cope. Okay, you're living in a fantasy land. This is just fantasy land speak. Wow, such cope is unbecoming. Cope. I swear. Cope.
All the Western support of Ukraine, but in a general sense, I would say, yeah, I mean, the Ukrainians are at the very least outmanned. Look, I'm a little apprehensive going down that road because I don't want to come across like I'm supporting Ukrainians being killed. Like, I don't support that whatsoever. You know? But all I'm saying is that when I talk about the proliferation of death, what I'm saying is that, yeah, Russia entering Ukraine, of course, an X number of people were going to die. But sending weapons over there to prolong the conflict will lead to more people dying. That's kind of my argument.
Do you think it was wrong for anyone to send the Viet Cong support?
Well, that's an interesting question. Again, I think it's a very different situation. And I don't, you know, feel totally comfortable, you know, making the A to A. It's apples and oranges. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, I think it's good if the Soviet Union supported the Viet Cong.
Okay. I think there was another thing I wanted to address. Fuck, what was it? What was the other thing? Oh yeah, the nukes. I am somebody who is generally in favor of denuclearization. I basically want most states to get rid of their nuclear arsenals. I think they're a ticking time bomb, quite literally. They're a ticking time bomb that will go off eventually, not even necessarily due to humans like deliberately nuking each other, but like some old nuclear arsenal rusting out or somebody forgetting about something and then boom, just fucking mass destruction. That's something that scares me quite a lot, right? And so I'm fearful of this thing you talked about. Basically, any country with a nuclear arsenal should basically kind of like become a pole. Wouldn't that just motivate a lot of weak countries, generally weak, like weak internationally speaking, not as people or anything?
Yeah, we know what you mean.
Like a weak nation to basically be like, well, if I want to get strong, I'll just get a nuke because then I'll be strong.
True.
I mean, that's what North Korea did, and that's terrible that they did that.
No, it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
You think it's a good thing?
It's a wonderful thing. That's the only thing that's...
They're doing missile launches over Japan right now.
I think the missile launches in general, I think, are a routine part of maintaining a nuclear arsenal for a country that's still developing the technology.
Would it be routine for us to do a missile launch over Russia?
We tested nuclear warheads all the time when we first developed them.
Did we launch missiles over Russia?
Yeah.
We didn't geopolitically, we weren't
Oh my god, so dishonest, so easily. What a bastardo.
in physically, geographically, a place where we had to do that to test their
What a
capabilities. No,
nationalist. Cringe.
North Korea is.
You know they did that knowing it would be extremely provocative and scary for Ukrainian as Japanese civilians as sirens go off, as they think maybe this will be the last time they get to speak to their families because a fucking missile is inbound. Like that's pretty scary.
I'm not saying that there isn't an aspect to that also includes, a show of force. Sure. But it's also part of testing the actual missiles themselves. Now, what I'm trying to get across to
But they can fire them up. They can test them by firing them up. That's how they usually do it to avoid confrontations like this.
This is so dishonest.
I'm trying to say.
Like he's pretending he doesn't know such things. So Dylan's concern is valid, but not in the way that he's suggesting. Nuclear weapons are not barrels of TNT. They're not going to randomly explode. They're more likely to create the big, they're more likely really big clocks. Well, I guess we can be more worried about nuclear waste leaking, right? I guess this would be the biggest worry, but yeah, I guess you're right. Like, holy moly. There's a problem in the United States and especially Russia where not nearly enough money is being spent to maintain. True. True.
It's good for North Korea to have nuclear weapons simply because it's preventing the invasion of North Korea, which is objectively what was going to happen in the 1990s during the famine. In fact, there's documentation. I can pull the sources up. It's like a whole thing. But basically, the U.S. government saw that there was a famine going on in North Korea. We actually decided not to provide aid or do any sort of like meaningful work with the Kim regime because we hoped that the famine would weaken the Kim regime and lead to it being overthrown. And that's one of the reasons why the North Koreans went through the arduous march. It was this horrible time in Korean history. And Kim Jong-il devoted so much of the country's resources to continue developing nuclear weapons. He was actually willing to drop that in the event that the U.S. would send aid and cut the sanctions, and we didn't.
Oh, yeah, he was willing to... Actually, it's not... Actually, no. The fact that North Korea decided to not aid its citizens and starve them out, it's actually the U.S.'s fault, not the regimes of North Korea. Did you not know? Right? The US should be ashamed. Feel shame, US government.
We didn't because we thought their regime would collapse on its own.
Do you legitimately think that the Kim regime would have dropped their pursuance of nuclear weapons if we...
No. No, I do not believe so.
If we reduced sanctions or stopped sanctions?
Nope.
They agreed to do.
That's what they agree. Do you think they've ever lied about their nuclear arsenal before?
Oops.
I think that you have just as much evidence for that as someone saying some random.
Well, I mean, so if wait, what do you mean? I just have as much evidence that they lied about the nuclear arsenal? Like we can just look at what they've said about the nuclear arsenal and then what is objective fact that they have a nuclear arsenal.
They've been pretty upfront that they've been developing it. It's not a matter of developing it and hiding. They've been actually, as you mentioned before, very open about the fact that they've developed it as a show of force. And it's not a show of force just for the sake of having a show of force. It's a show of force to show that they're not going to be pressured into making regime change.
Do you think that if it wasn't for nuclear weapons that they would have been invaded?
Yeah.
You don't think China would have stepped in with their nuclear arsenal and stopped that? As happens with many nuclear... I mean, the Soviet Union did this many times, that they had a nuclear arsenal.
In the 90s, I'm less confident in saying that China would have jumped in to defend North Korea.
Was there any invasion plans drawn? I honestly don't know. But how far along was American invasion plans?
Well, we didn't attempt to invade.
In fact, wasn't it because of China that that the North
simply because we
beat
hoped the
back the
Kim regime would
US
collapse
and
on its
South
own.
Korea?
What I'm
It was because of the China support. Right?
trying to argue to you is, let's say Kim never developed the weapons at all. And once we, had a rapprochement with China in the 70s and then into the 80s and the 90s, when that economic relationship became further developed, and our relationship with China was really good, it's not infeasible to suggest that, like, hey, yeah, now we can just triangulate around North Korea, depose Kim, and set up a, puppet regime over there.
If we knew they were developing nukes, why didn't we just invade then? Because if they were developing nuclear weapons, then that would be the best time to invade, because once they have them, it's going to be a lot harder, right?
I think a big part of the reason we didn't was because a bulk of the nuclear research was taking place at a time when it would have been untenable to invade.
Okay. I have some vague memories about the Clinton administration in my mind right now, but it completely fails me. I haven't.
You mean you weren't there? You don't remember?
No, I wasn't born yet. Sadly,
Well,
I
that's
missed
kinda
that.
cringe.
Yeah, I was in my father's nutsack. Sadly, didn't have a front.
Damn,
row
I was
seat
like
to that.
already 3 years old. Anyway, oh no, actually, wait, no, I was only one. Never mind.
Don't ask me how old I was.
Okay, I won't ask you. I won't. God, there was something else I wanted to ask you, but I already forgot what it was.
That's my fault. Sorry.
Fuck, what was it?
We were talking about whether or not the U.S. would have invaded, and
Yeah, but there was something. Oh, fuck, I already forgot it. So it's gone to time.
That's all right. I mean, we're a little off topic. I mean, not extremely off topic, because again, it's just lending to the idea. You were saying that it's not good if more countries develop nuclear weapons. And, I think in a general sense, long term, yeah, I totally support nuclear, denuclearization for all, right? But currently, there are many countries with nuclear weapons and a few countries that are trying to develop them. Okay, so we're in a situation where objectively, I'm trying to suggest to you, all those countries should probably have a seat at this, so to speak, multipolar table, right? Because they all have the capability to do a lot of fucking damage.
I think there could be like a conference for nuclear states to discuss issues about nuclear. But I don't think that having a nuclear bomb should necessarily come with like special voting power in the UN and like, I have a bomb, therefore fuck your human rights legislation, because that would be absolutely terrible way to run things. It's just, I have bigger bomb, therefore human rights can suck.
Mine is bigger.
I think that's a terrible way to run things.
True.
There is a lot of problems with the UN in general, right?
The human rights count. I don't think that we should have these permanent seats at the top of it to begin with. I think that is inherently anti-democratic.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it should be a rotating sort of thing. But
yeah. Oh, but here's the other question. I remembered it. Do you think Ukraine should have given up their arsenal?
Their nuclear weapons?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting question, and I understand why you're asking it. I would say, generally speaking, in that case, it was probably the right thing for Ukraine to do, assuming that Ukraine and Russia would have good relations moving forward. Obviously, in retrospect, it appears to be a big mistake. Ultimately, that would have prevented the SMO.
Didn't Russia say they would respect Ukraine's international borders and the agreement that they made to get rid of their nuclear arsenal? But then immediately when Ukraine's like, you know what? We're not going to go the path of being extremely favorable towards Russia. They're like, never mind.
Yeah. Who was the leader of Russia when that happened?
Vladimir Putin, 2014? What do you mean?
With the agreement to denuclearize?
Oh, no, I thought you were talking 2014 when they invaded. I think it was...
What does it matter?
Gorbachev or Yeltsin.
Wait, what does it matter? Like, what? Oh, they are debating Ukraine, of course. Boy meets Mini. Like, what do you mean? What does it matter who's in charge of Russia at a given time? So what? Agreements only are valid for as long as the current leader of a given country is in charge?
Yeltsin. So what I'm trying to say is that this administration and that one, two very different things.
What?
Yeah, I also agree that... Well, no, I don't know if you agree with it, but I think Putin's a terrible, terrible, terrible human being.
I think we make Putin out to... I wouldn't say Putin.
International agreements are only good from administration to administration? What is this supposed to be? like, is this person really saying that international agreements stop being, stop sort of having power when a new administration comes into power? What are you saying?
Putin's some great guy at all. Okay, but I think the U.S. media is extremely guilty of making Putin seem like a uniquely evil person, when relative to the rest of the world, I would say he's about as evil as any other leader.
I would not agree with that. I would say he's on the more evil spectrum of world leaders. I think most nations haven't had their military create fucking mass graves in another country. Actually, most world leaders haven't invaded another country.
The U.S.
Yeah, but the U.S. is an exceptional case, isn't it?
Well,
you said on the spectrum of the world, he's like in the middle, and I'm thinking most leaders have not ordered the invasion of another nation. That's the first thing. Most
engaged to that extent.
Yeah, most leaders haven't engaged in a war of aggression. Most leaders haven't engaged in the annexation of another nation's territory illegally like this. Most leaders haven't engaged in it's hard to know exactly where the order came from, but we do know that there was orders for the execution of civilians. Who gave those orders? How high those orders went up? We don't know. But at the end of the day, he is the president of the Russian Federation. He is the one that would be held accountable in this type of situation. That was the precedent we sent after Nuremberg. So I mean, I would say he's pretty evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
you cannot just say, Putin, yes, he's like run-of-the-mill leader. No. Like, that is scope to just say that Putin is like just some run-of-the-mill leader. He devastated Chechnya in the mid-90s, no better than Yeltsin, yeah.
Ukraine's right to exist, to die in a nation who wants to exist, their right to exist, when they very clearly have for hundreds of years struggled for their right to exist. It's pretty evil. It's the same thing Erdogan's doing to the Kurdish people. I think that's evil as well.
Yeah, so I guess maybe I could clarify. Equal to a country of comparable size, in terms of military strength, military size,
So you would say Joe Biden and Putin are on the same level.
Oh yeah, Joe Biden's a monster.
You want on the same level? I wouldn't say they're on the same level.
No,
I wouldn't go
Would you agree he's a monster?
What do you agree he's a monster? I guess relative to what is the question? Yeah, relative to what? Relative to U.S. leaders, no. Relative to the average person, yes. But that would be true of any major state.
Thank you. That's just my point.
Okay. I thought you said of the world countries,
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, what I'm trying to kind of get the idea across is that world leaders in general, relative to the average person, are monsters.
Why would you compare world leaders to an average person? That's a pretty silly thing to do.
Many world leaders, most world leaders in America. I mean, how many people? What do you think? George W.
I mean,
what do you think?
I guess the difference is, right, when Joe Biden, right, he is president of the United States. The one thing he's done while in office that I think probably actually realigned a lot of my opinions on him was he's drawn down the American drone war to levels that we've never seen it drawn down to. Would you agree to that or not?
I agree with that.
If I said, if I said there was a 95 decrease percent in drone strikes in a president's term, you would assume it was fucking like the Green Party won the White House if you heard that in most circumstances.
I'm familiar with the reduction in drone strikes, Dylan.
Yeah,
do you think
he pulled out of Afghanistan, which was...
Do you think that's... Dude, pulling out of... Well, okay.
Wait, do you think... Let me ask you a question. Do you think Pete Buttigieg would have pulled out of Afghanistan?
You're saying a lot of shit, dude. Like, the pulling out of Afghanistan was a good thing in general, right? We needed to leave there. The way we exited was a fucking disaster. Everybody knows that.
Of course.
And then the drone thing is a stupid argument because he's done more to create war by funding, Ukraine and sending weapons over there.
He didn't create the war. Russia created the war when they invaded. You responded to the war. As a leader, you have to respond to wars of aggression. Churchill didn't create World War II because
kids were fighting on the playground. You gave one a gun and the other one a knife. Wouldn't
Did
that be like?
Okay, so FDR,
True.
World War
What the
II. We're
hell?
back to this shit again.
Stop bringing
Like,
it up.
yeah, but the thing is, FDR didn't create the war. Just
Yeah,
like
well,
South Korea didn't create the war during the
True.
Wars. The fucking it was the Kim family who invaded the South, right? They created the war.
Yeah.
Whoever, if you initiate a war, you created it. If you initiate a war, you created it. If I stabbed you, I initiated a fight. If I punched you, I created the fight.
True.
Attack me. What did I do?
You know what I mean, though. If I punched you, I created the fight. If you defend yourself.
Korea was created by the U.S. We drew you understand
What?
the U.S. military establishment legit took a map from National Geographic, decided the borderline.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, the whole reason that conflict happened is because of the U.S.
Well,
Like,
and Stalin and the Kim family. I mean,
Well,
like
Stalin-
what?
no,
I mean, let me ask you a question.
Stalin-
What claim to power did Kim realistically have?
True.
He really did bad shit.
Popular sovereignty.
Popular sovereignty. How popular was he that he had to be propped up by the
Oh,
Soviets?
we intervened before we gave the country a chance to decide on their own. because
You
we
mean
wanted to-
so you're saying when you say you mean like with the elections or do you mean with the invasion?
No, when we legit drew up a boundary line, and you mentioned Stalin's fault and all of that is agreeing to it, which even the U.S. military was shocked that he did that. But the U.S. military basically, was Bone Steel and all these people drew up this border line, totally arbitrary, divided the country, and the South attacked. Initially, the North responded and invaded, and then the war happened, but we
Wait.
never gave the Korean people.
What do you mean the South?
What? This is such weird retelling of history. He did say that, yes. He did say that. But I guess arguments are like, But now he's saying they created it, Like trying to defend North Korea, is ridiculous.
South attacked initially. What do you mean by that? So the South invaded.
No, the South attacked first. They were
How did
sheltered.
they?
What?
Okay, who gives a fuck? I couldn't care less. This is. I mean, that's. I mean, the Poles shelled the Germans, right? The Poles shelled the Germans when the Germans invaded. I mean, this every war. It's like that.
Nobody's
Yeah.
saying that. Nobody's saying that. It's not always about World War II. Now, come on.
No, but because that's.
Yep, the Polish people attacked the German, radio station. There we go. There we go. How has the US created the war mesh if they didn't join the war until after it started? That's just textbook. Yeah, it is. Like, how do you say, oh yeah, it was the South Korea that attacked first and then North invaded? Like, ridiculous.
Russians said that the fucking Ukrainians attacked them. The Germans said the Poles attacked them. This is every war they say that they attacked first and then they go in and they invade and start conquering.
I can find your source.
Okay. I think we're kind of getting off topic a little bit here.
Yeah, I was just gonna say maybe let's wrap up in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Run back to the actual Ukraine-Russian thing. Since that we came into this, with the discussion being about should the U.S. be funding Ukraine in this conflict, I think that'd be a good point to close on. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Non-smoker, do you have a preference on who goes first in this?
What a name.
No, it doesn't matter. I could go first.
Yes.
Okay, sure.
I mean, I'm not convinced,
Non-smoker.
at the end of the day. And okay, I think it's important for me to say that most Americans or most people, I think, who support Ukraine in this conflict, are generally well-intended, usually liberal-minded people.
Evil people.
Okay, so I don't think that the people who support Ukraine or whatever, even people who maybe have a negative view of Putin or whatever, are bad people and horrible. And I'm definitely not anti-Ukraine. I don't want you.
Wait. Are you suggesting that having a negative view of Putin could possibly make you look like a bad person? Is this what you're... Oh, I'm not saying that anyone who is this is like when What? Let's analyze this statement. I'm not saying that people that think better of Putin are bad people. Well, great, because it's good to think bad of Putin. What do you mean? Ridiculous. What's happening here?
To be destroyed and all this shit. Like, I would not ever advocate for anything like that. Ultimately, I want the war to end. I would like there to be peace. I do not think that can be achieved by us sending billions of dollars of weapons to Ukraine. It's totally counterintuitive. I mean, Dylan keeps bringing up the example of two people getting into a fight. If you keep throwing weapons in the middle of a fight, it's not going to reduce the...
You're not what? Supporting... Wait, hold on. Supporting Ukraine is not throwing weapons in the middle of a fight. It's supporting one side, the side that it's defending itself. Now, this is just mischaracterizing the situation altogether. This is ultra bad faith. To say that the US supporting Ukraine is throwing weapons, quote unquote, in the middle of the fight. Because saying throwing weapons in the middle of the fight implies that it's just the weapons are being thrown for either side to pick up and use. Okay? What the hell? What the hell? This is what it implies, throwing weapons in the middle of the conflict.
Probability that the fight will continue. It's reducing the probability that the fight will be worse, right? That's my whole argument, and it's having a disastrous impact on the domestic economy. It's not going to get any better. Here's the one thing I'll grant Dylan. We're headed for a recession one way or another. And when I talk about civil unrest, it would not be simply because of Ukraine. What I'm saying, though, is that the situation in Ukraine is exacerbating this problem, and that the civil unrest, therefore, will be to a greater
Ukraine
degree
should just be abandoned,
right,
for the greater good, huh?
This conflict continually, which I think is sad to say, and maybe for Dylan.
Oh, you're so
and people who support
sad.
Ukraine,
You're
I think
so
it's a losing
sad.
effort.
So, I think sometimes you need to end a fight by winning it. And I think that's the best way to end the fight. Not only because by winning it do you preserve certain things, whether it be Ukraine's democracy, Ukraine's territorial integrity, stop your people from being occupied and brutalized as the Russian government has done in Bucha, in Mariupol, in Kharkiv, and Izium, in Lyman, and all these locations that have dropped into the international atmosphere of attention due to the scale of Russian violence. As I mean, the most recent report of that was really horrifying to me was of this little portable Auschwitz that this one group of Russian soldiers made, where they took a gas mask, put it on people they were torturing, and then lit a cloth on fire and choked them to death as a form of torture. Like, the type of brutality we've seen is absolutely atrocious. And I think that this is a fight that you end by winning.
True.
A lot of times, if we're going to be using playground fight analogies, a lot of times you can try to appease them all you want, but at some point you need to put a red line in the sand. And I think the Russians have crossed that red line, and that the correct outcome here is for them to leave Ukraine. When we say this is a losing effort, on the while we're saying this at the same time that the Russians just got.
Keep in mind, this person has already said that it would be for the greater good to just abandon Ukraine. It's one of the few cases where US NATO are on the right side, unlike what they did in Bangladesh in struggle for independence in 1971.
Routed in Kharkiv, the supposedly second most powerful army in the world. At the same time, they just got pushed out of Lyman. At the same time that the front line is collapsing around Kherson as more and more Russian soldiers surrender, and Russia has to take more and more brutal measures that even the Ukrainians don't have to take to defend themselves. The most obvious example of this is the 10 years in prison you can get for surrendering to Ukraine.
But a recession is absolutely a red herring. There are dozens of other factors contributing much more to the recession, most strongly a lack of legal action against crooked corporations. True! Like,
These are ridiculous policies implemented by a desperate administration that is clawing at straws to see how they can save their colonial project because the colonized don't want to be colonized and they're not subjecting
Darren is
themselves
so
to this
great
anymore.
on this. Like,
I think that this is a moral struggle, and people can say, "Oh, well, by us giving them guns, the Ukrainian, this keeps the war going because the Ukrainians will use these weapons."
Because Russia keeps attacking. Do you know why? Do you know what makes the war going? Russia keeping attacking makes the war going. So in this guy's mind, the only thing that would end the war would just Ukraine losing. This is what this person is de facto saying. Anyone who says that the war would end if the support was cut is basically de facto saying the only way for this war to end is for Ukraine to lose. This is what those people are saying. And more people should just point it out, that by saying the war will not end until the support ends, that they are basically saying the war won't end until Ukraine loses. It's time to
they will use these weapons. They will use these weapons to win the war, therefore ending the war. And ultimately, the population that should that can have the moral declaration on whether their deaths are worth the struggle are the Ukrainians. And if we were to look at any polling number from the Ukrainian population, the vast majority do not want to give up their territory. The vast majority do not want to surrender with the Russians. The vast majority barely even want to negotiate, considering the different things that Russia has done to them, not only over the past over 200 days, but the past 8 years as they lied about putting their troops near Crimea, invaded Crimea, then illegally annexed it, lied about it the whole time, did a fake...
8 years and before. And if Kratos was serious about the economy, he would be arguing with people about that, not the war in Ukraine. I would go so far as to say he's implicitly supporting the recession. Don't worry, they promised they would stop at Crimea.
Referendum supported separatist and FSB agents as they went into Donetsk and shot down civilian airliners and brutalized the local population, persecuting religious minorities. Or we could just look at this bigger invasion, which they lied and talked about this was a training exercise on the border before invading. This is a pattern of behavior by the Russian government that needs to be stopped now, not 20 years down the road, with a settlement that will ultimately be broken if Ukraine isn't in a position of strength to defend itself moving forward. I think the Ukrainians should end the war by winning it.
True. Darren is so good.
All right. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys both being here. First of all, I want to thank Non-Smoker for being flexible and allowing Dylan to be on at all tonight. I want to thank Dylan for coming on such short notice. And I know that this kind of turned into like a debate between you two and then me just kind of moderating. I thought that it was, I thought it was fine. I thought it was good. I got a lot of high-level important ideas in my brain right now. And I do want to inform myself more on this conflict. So I was very informative from both of you. Thank you so much.
Oh, informative from Non-Smoker. Wow. Yeah. Slava Ukraini. Or, if you, as you would say it in Polish, Sława Ukrainie. Chwała Ukrainie. Sława Ukrainie, chwała Ukrainie. You can say both ways in Polish. Slava Ukraini. Those languages are pretty similar. Yeah. You're in a really sad position when you think that Non-Smoker guy was informative about the Ukrainian conflict. Like, that's, no, that's something. That's something else, right?
Guys, for your perspectives, and I hope both of you have a really great night.
If you want more information, I got a few Raytheon packets I can give you that give you a lot of good info.
Okay, I'll consider that. Thank you, Dylan.
No worries.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay, you both have a good one.
You too.
You as well. Thanks, Dylan.
Well, look at that. We had a debate today.
Yeah.
We had a debate on the internet. We had a debate on the internet.
All right.
I had no clue who that person was. I was gonna say it's generally polite, but I was accused of being Hitlerian a few times. But you know, it is what it is. I'm just used to that type of dialogue on the internet anyway. As long as somebody's not literally screaming at the top of their lungs, it feels like it was like a polite debate. That's how low our standards have gotten. How are you doing, site chat, Twitch chat? How you guys doing? How you guys feel about that? It just kept using. God, I felt like. I think the thing that
I feel how I feel about this. I feel this was a really. It's just a waste of time for Dylan.
got me.
Debates like that are a waste of time, considering all the things that Dylan has been doing recently. Debates are like that are a waste of time for him. I'm not gonna lie. You know?
Is we established immediately almost that, hey, so you are willing to sanction countries and send aid to a country even though you're a non-interventionist, even if the struggle is moral and it's for a moral reason. So we immediately got around that, but we would pivot back to it any time I felt like
True.
we got to like a corner or we got somewhere.
Let me read it out loud. There's something my grandpa used to say. War is the cruelest and most unjust of all God's creations, and anyone who would bring war to innocent people needs to be stopped at all costs.
Where I feel like there has we need like a hard yes or no, like an answer here, you know? Was that the progenitor of the morally corrupt, bankrupt man soundbite? No, that was actually BPF. Dylan's frame is unbreakable. Oh, shucks. Dylan Burns. Dylan, you got a knuckle dragger here that's named Third Testicles. Oh, fantastic. Shit tier debate. Wait, 1 second. I can't see what it says. You said God tier debate. Awesome. It was a good one. I'm glad.
Was it?
The Church of Raytheon. Lockheed Martin are heretics, and Raytheon is the one true church we should worship at. A Raytheon office was literally.
What is a good debate?
Across the
I don't know. I don't know if
near
I
my school
say
when I was
that.
growing up. My
That's a
high
bit
school,
far.
It was literally
That's a
across
bit
from my
much.
high school, and it pissed
Say
me
that
off a
was
ton
good.
as a young little Bernie bro. The kid. Crazy how he would say stop comparing the conflict to other conflicts every time you compared it. Well, because he thought those conflicts were moral while this one wasn't. When all I wanted to establish with him was that him saying he's an anti-interventionist is not really true. Because if I provide him a situation where he wants to intervene, like apartheid South Africa, he's perfectly willing to intervene.
True.
And so the real question wasn't, should we or should we not support the morality of the Ukrainian struggle? Because of anti-interventionist leanings, because I don't feel like he's really an anti-interventionist. It should have become a question of like, is the Ukrainian struggle moral?
True.
And sadly, that's the one thing I don't feel like we got to like go back and forth over. Funny how he said don't bring up history, then immediately brings up. I don't think he said don't bring up history, but I do feel like he was uncomfortable by the comparisons. Stop bringing up wars I like in hindsight. It shows my ideas are inconsistent. Yeah, that was pretty mean of me. That was very mean of me. Oh God, he said my chat doesn't like you. I wonder what his chat was all up on.
Oh yeah.
Wonder how his chat was really doing.
Yeah, I guess it's time for us to. It's time for me to go to the toilet, and then we will do some more things. So don't leave, like the stream, consider becoming a Patreon, right? Always consider becoming a Patreon, and we will be back with more nice things, okay? Okay, I will be right back. Don't run away.